talking about straining for that logo on the side of your helmet and not the name on your back.
Yes, sir.
Because we know what it represents. It represents everybody here you see and everybody you can't that we've talked about. I'm here to strain with you, man. I swear to God, I'm here to strain with you. Let's go. Everything you got, strain with everything you got. Let's go. Bills on 3. 1, 2, 3. Bills.
You're listening to the Off Tackle with John Fina show with your host, Joe Miller. Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome everybody into the Off Tackle with John Fina show, brought to you by the Market Dominator team on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network, presented by Picasso's Pizza. Treat yourself to the most flavorful pizza on game day. Picasso's, we are Buffalo Pizza, shipping local and nationwide. Order online at picassospizza.net. I am the host of this here Off Tackle with John Fina show. My name is Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired, and sitting right beside me right there is the star of this show, former offensive tackle for the Buffalo Bills, the one and the only, maybe, John Fina.
Happy Victory Monday.
Your shirt?
I finally got my shirt from 26 Shirts, man. I've been, there only come so many extra smalls. You have to wait until they refill the extra smalls. I got mine skin tight.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. John Fina and his schmediums. 6'5"
That's right, baby. That's right.
His schmediums. So it is good to see you, but we have a really good show for you. We appreciate everybody who is piling into the comments section and into the chat. Whatever platform you are consuming this podcast or video cast on, please please subscribe. We are also Super Chat Live, which is exciting when you've got a legend in the house, and I'm not speaking of you tonight. We have another former Bills legend. Steve Tasker will be joining us just in a moment, but it's so good to have every single one of you. Why don't we start this thing off? Why don't we hear from our title sponsor, John Spascheck, right now? What do you say?
I love it. I love to hear from John Spascheck. His message is fantastic.
Here comes.
Strategy, block, vision, get your vision up, balance, foot back, head up. Yeah, these are some of the strategies my good friend John Fina used to dominate on the field when he was playing for our great Buffalo football team. And these are some of the things that I use in real estate to dominate as the market dominator, and also the proud sponsor of the John Fina show, hosted by Joe Miller. So if you want to win in the real estate market, it's going to be important to bring good vision so you can see what's out there, good balance of the market. Folks, strategy is critical, and this is what we do. We educate, we advocate, we negotiate, and we dominate. So if you want to win the way our football team is, you call me directly, 716-570-3298. Let's go, Buffalo!
Let's go, Buffalo. That is the market dominator, John Spascheck himself. If you're looking to buy or sell a home, please give him and his team a call, 716-570-3298. That number again, 716-570-3298. John, we appreciate you. We appreciate all of our sponsors here on the Off Tackle with John Fina show, but we probably shouldn't even really delay and stuff. We should just get into this thing, you think?
Oh, 100%, man.
100%.
One of my favorite teammates.
Yeah. Was there more to that conversation or no?
No, man. I mean, I don't want to embarrass the guy, but he really looked out for me my rookie year, and he showed me the ropes. He was a steady Eddie kind of guy. On the field, a different guy, but in the locker room, man, I mean, this is the guy you went to.
He was a menace on the field, but drafted in the 9th round of the 1985 NFL draft at a Northwestern by the Houston Oilers. 2 years later, he was picked up by the Buffalo Bills off of waivers, where he would go on to become one of the most prolific special teams players and an excellent wide receiver when called upon in NFL history. Played with the Bills for 12 years, 204 special teams tackles, 7 block punts, 7 Pro Bowl selections. The only special teams player ever elected to be the Pro Bowl MVP. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Steve Tasker. Steve, welcome, my friend. Good to have you.
Hey, guys. How are you? It's good to be here.
Happy Victory Monday to you, Steve.
Yeah, happy Victory Monday. It's not, I don't usually drink while I'm on the air or broadcasting, but Yeah, I have constraints, but this is my office at the
You got to get your
house, so I guess we're
contract.
all right.
You get your contract rewritten.
That's funny. So,
Yeah.
Steve, what have you been up
Yeah.
to lately? Are you doing anything with the Bills anymore? What do you do day to day now?
Yeah, I'm on every day. I'm on live every day for 2 hours, 2 hours of radio show, One Bills Live.
Yeah.
We do that. Chris Brown and I are on that 2 hours a day. Today we're on 3 hours on Victory Mondays. On Mondays after games, we're on 3 hours. I do pregame, postgame with Matty Glab for the team. I'm still on the payroll over there.
That's awesome.
Today I taped the Sean McDermott show with the coach. On Mondays we do that after the game. So yeah, I do that, and yeah, I'm a full-time guy over at the stadium. I'm in the field house all day, every day, and
That's awesome.
I'll tell you, it is kind of awesome because it's a great place to be these days. Great people, great leadership. The ownership has been fantastic. The coach, the general manager, all the people down through the ranks of the organization. It's really a quality place to work. It really is.
That's awesome.
There might have been a few years ago where it was kind of rough going into the field house. I mean, you're taking the slings and arrows from every direction.
Right. Well, it's, it was a tough spot for the organization to be in. I mean, you're talking about, probably 2013 when Ralph was still owning the team. Ralph was a great owner, loved him, and I owed him a lot. But when I retired, the guy was 80. And, it's hard to get quality, coaches and guys to sign on long-term to an organization they don't think is going to be owned by that guy in 6 months. And he lived to be 95. So it was a 15-year period where after I left, where it was very difficult for them to get quality coaches and stuff like that for the Bills, not because Ralph was, back, but, ownership's an issue when you're talking about coaches. So
uncertainty, man. You take everything into account, right? These guys have families too. They got to weigh every variable when entertaining a job.
And so it was tough for a long time. And that's not the only reason. I mean, there were other reasons as well. Draft picks and where they stood in the draft and salary cap and things. Philosophies and stuff like that. But once Terry Pagula and Kim bought it and took it over. Doug Marrone left the organization under their watch. He just said, "I'm done," and left. That's another illustration of uncertain owners. He left. They hired Rex because Rex, I think they were new to the game. Rex came in and swept them off their feet. Rex is a verbose guy, really. He's a gregarious guy. It's fun to hang out with him. I'm sure he swept them off their feet in the interview process. But I'll say this: the minute it became real that Rex wasn't the guy, they did not care. He was done.
Wow.
That's the business, though, right? I mean, it
wasn't that way. Hey, it wasn't that way with Rex, because they're still on the hook for his salary and all that. And Terry, to his credit, he said, "Hey, I do not care. I am not living like this. Get me." And then they got consultants. They had people who talked about it, and the experts come in. What are you looking for in a head coach? Here's what you should look for. The experts in the real world came in and got them on the right track. And, of course, they hired Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, and now they're in the playoffs every stinking year, and they're one of the best clubs in the league. So, they learned
one of the best clubs in the league, like the secret that we had when we were there. It was like the best kept
well, it's
secret.
not just the club. Yeah, it's not just the club. You're right. And now it is the club. But it's also, the city and how the city of Buffalo and the fan base have rallied and proven themselves to be something different than other fan bases.
Yeah.
Something special. And that's pretty cool.
It is really cool. And with that, Steve, I know you're a conduit to places unreachable by Joe and I. So please extend everybody in the chat, all of our listeners and yours, of course, our best wishes for both Kim Pagula and John Murphy, whom you must know very, very well. And, just send it up the chain, whether you just get your vibes a little bit closer than we can. I know Joe and I and everybody in the chat here would really appreciate it. So
for sure. Yeah. And actually even to that point, and doubling back to even DeMar Hamlin and just seeing what that whole situation brought about. And as a man of faith, and John is a man of faith, and Steve, I know you're a man of faith, just seeing the spiritual awakening that kind of happened through that whole situation across this nation due to, a Buffalo Bills player. Can you real quick, briefly kind of take us through, because I know that talking with John, talking with Jerry Ostrowski, that they were shook as even former players by just what they kind of saw and how things happened. Where were you at, just headspace wise, mind wise, heart wise, spiritually? Like, where were you at through that whole process?
I was at the stadium. We were watching because we do live post-game, pre-game from the stadium. So I have to watch the away games there with the crew in a control room, and we have a bunch of people there. And when it happened, you know how it is. You think, okay, how long is he going to be down? They'll pick him up and they'll take him off and we'll get going again. And then when we come back from a commercial, they went to, I don't know if you guys realize, they went to like 4 commercial breaks right away. And I didn't know this until later, but a lot of things happened while the national TV audience was away in breaks. There was sprinting and guys bringing the defib guy out to the middle of the field. They brought the players. They asked the players to surround them so that it wouldn't be seen. And that's very unusual. They brought the ambulance up there. All this stuff's going on. That is, all of a sudden, it became not just another injury. Every player from both sidelines was on the field. Mm-hmm. They were huddled around, and you could see camera shots of the shock and horror and the surprise, the unbelievable reaction of some of the players, DeMar's teammates, Josh, Tre'Davious White, Steph Diggs, all these guys. It was unbelievable. And I could feel for Joe Buck and Troy Aikman in the booth trying to grab. They don't have anything to say. There's nothing they can say. Right, they're looking for anything to say. So their guy, John Terry, or I think it's John Perry. I'm sorry. John Perry, I think he's in the booth with Joe and Troy. And I'm sure he was on the phone with New York saying, hey, what's the story? What are we going to do? And New York, the guy he calls in New York, which is a commonplace occurrence, probably said, hey, usually it's a 5-minute warm up after this is all done. And we kind of get it going. That's what usually happens. So Perry hangs the phone up, looks at Troy Aikman and Joe and says, well, I talked to New York and they said like a 5-minute warm up and they'll get back at it. And so Troy and Joe say, well, we've been told by New York, which technically is true, but it's just it's a procedural thing. It's not what they're going to do, right?
Yeah.
They come out, hey, it's going to be 5 minutes, and they're going to start going. And Joe Burrow's out there warming up. He doesn't know how it's going to go. And I didn't know that, I kind of put these pieces together later. When Zach Taylor walked across the field and talked to Sean McDermott, you can see Sean talking with his hand over his mouth. Mm-hmm. And we heard later that Sean said, listen, I don't need to be coaching this team. I need to be at the hospital with DeMar. And both coaches were unwilling to proceed.
Yeah. Yep.
That right then and there is when the decision was made. Those head coaches said, we ain't doing it.
That was a powerful moment.
To their credit, Troy Vincent and Roger Goodell took their word for it and believed the guys that were there. The head coach said, you're right. We're doing it. Kudos to the league for backing those guys up in that moment.
You never see a head coach make his way all the way across the field to the other sideline. When he made that beeline for Sean McDermott, I looked at my wife and my daughter was like, this game's over. And they're like, how do you know? I was like, because this that you're watching right now never happened.
Never.
It's unprecedented.
I'll tell you what was a beautiful moment about that. And you know what? Sure, there might have been some gaffes, 5-minute warm up. The game goes on. I can forgive all of that because this is unprecedented. Mm-hmm. But what I love is that the two guys who are in charge of running the show were just able to say, we've always said that life is bigger than football, that there are some things that are bigger than football. And when there was the opportunity to go either way, they really chose to stand by the words of themselves and the players and humanity, I guess, and that was, I guess, I thought looking back on it, it's heartwarming.
Yeah, it was an enormously positive moment for the league in what could have been a tragic setting. Mm-hmm. And after that, when the game was over, we didn't, nobody knew how DeMar was going to be, and we didn't know how positive it was going to turn out. It was for about, I don't know, what was it, 72 hours. They finally got he was off the ventilator and they said he was going to do, and he FaceTimed the team and flexed for him. the time between that FaceTime and the incident on Monday Night Football was a very, very difficult week for all of us here in Buffalo. Working over there, very difficult week. The club had asked us, me and Chris Brown, my co-host on One Bills Live, and Maddie Glab, who's the team reporter. We're the three kind of media personalities. Of course, the players are the center of it all. We're just kind of facilitators. But they told us, and you can imagine, my phone was absolutely exploding with requests all over the country to come on and talk about it. What's going on with the team? How are the players acting? How are they feeling? What's going on with the coaches? The whole thing. And the club rightfully said, don't do it for at least for this week, maybe not next week either. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big relief because it was, I don't know how any other way to say it. It was very, very difficult for all of us to go to work and continue on, and the players especially. So, yeah, it was a big moment when DeMar came out of the woods.
Yeah. And God just being in it, and like I said, seeing the spiritual awakening, and just even like the references to the number 3, which he wears. And, the numbers have great significance in Scripture. The number 3 is the number of perfection. And just to see that number pop up so many times, even kind of as he was coming out of this thing, has been tremendous. And I actually noticed, so there's 3 of us, this is unscripted, and we're all wearing the Standing Buffalo logo. So let's just take that as a sign that God's in this weekend. So, because
I'll say this, if you can watch the opening kickoff of that New England Patriot game and not think it's something supernatural happened, I don't know. You don't have a pulse.
Yeah.
I told even from when my kids were being born, all the sporting events my kids have been to, all the great things I've seen as an analyst, the things I took part in, I have never been a part of something that moved me and where I was absolutely sure that there was a greater power involved than that play right there. Yeah. I could not believe what I was seeing. And it was an absolute miracle fairy tale.
Yeah.
And Josh said the same thing. I mean, you can't, you could feel it. I mean, there's people that you just can't come up with another explanation for it. It was miraculous. And to have, Nyheim Hines take the opening kickoff of that game, 96 yards for a touchdown. I was I was standing up in the radio. We watched the game in the radio booth behind John Murphy and Eric Wood. In this case, it was Chris Brown and Eric Wood. We were standing up behind, and I was standing up with both hands on top of my head, screaming. I could not believe it. I lost my mind. I absolutely lost my mind. I've never lost my mind at any moment in my career or since over a play like I've lost my mind over that Nyheim Hines kickoff return. Never. It's unbelievable.
Wow. It's amazing. Well, Steve, thank you so much for just bringing that back to us and telling us that story, because every story is unique. All of us, it affected all of us so much and was so difficult. As you said, Buffalo Rumblings shut down. So like we do a ton of podcasts and a ton of video stuff. And I have a post-game show, the Overreaction post-game show that I do every week after the game. And I canceled that. So we did the same exact thing that the Bills had you do. We just shut it down and we let just kind of the moment be the moment, and let's get through this together as a country. So thank you again for just kind of reliving that and letting us know. Let's move to the football game, and let's talk about this past football game, and then we'll talk about briefly what's going to happen, hopefully, in the Bengals game. But before we do, John's going to let us know about House Capital real quick.
Yeah, Steve, I just want to let you know, man, the next time you're going to buy a house, look, everybody's got a guy, right? But if you need work on your roof, Joe Miller can do it. Heck, I can do your inspection, because everybody knows somebody. But when you're looking to get your financing together, Steve Tasker, you need to call Brian Belser from House Capital Corporation, because he will be your guy. Brian Belser and House Capital make the mortgage process simple, hassle-free, and understandable. At House Capital, their preferred relationships with some of the top lenders give you the edge up in getting the financing you need. Steve Tasker, take it to the house with House Capital.
Take it to the house. Give Brian Belser a call if you have the opportunity. So let's start with the just your overarching high level thoughts, as we do every single week, of this game. Steve, we're going to give you the floor. So just first glance thoughts on this football game against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday.
Bills are a really good football team, and they have seen the enemy, and it is them. They are their own worst enemy. I have said it. I did a thing today on the radio. The Bills over their last 29 games are 25-4. No, that's sorry, 24-5. Sorry, they're 24 wins, 5 losses. Of the 5 losses, 2 of them are overtime losses by touchdowns. 1 to Tampa Bay, 1 to Kansas City. The other 3 losses are by a total of 8 points.
Mm-hmm.
They are a tough team to beat. A tough team to beat. Even when they turn it over 3 times.
7 sacks.
And they don't seem to be clicking on all cylinders. Josh is throwing it to the wrong jersey. You look up and it's 30. They've scored 34 points. I mean, they are good. They're really, really good. And it's going to take a great effort by the Cincinnati Bengals to beat them. Now, the Bengals are good too. They've got some guys and they've got a good defense. They're stacked. No question about it. And they look good early in that Monday night game before it was stopped because of DeMar's incident. But for me, most teams, it has been typical for me that most teams really make some hay offensively early in games against the Bills.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One of the things that the Buffalo Bills have done really well with Leslie Frazier as their coordinator and Sean McDermott and the whole crew, they put the screws down and they in-game adjust really well. Really well. It gets harder and harder and more difficult to score on this team as the game goes on. But early on, teams will make hay. They will make hay. They'll score some points. The first quarter, teams will, they'll get off to a fast start before the Bills start to rally.
Yeah.
And offensively, I think teams are really doing their best. Last week, week 18 of the regular season against New England, they did it. And now I think that the Miami Dolphins did it in this last game. When they're defending Josh Allen, teams are doing their best to rush him, but make sure he doesn't pull the ball down with it.
Yeah.
If he's going to beat you, make him do it from the pocket.
Right.
He scored 35 on New England and 34 on the Dolphins, and he beat them both. But let's say it didn't look like the Bills' offense because they made him stand in the pocket and beat him. When he tried to leave, they tackled him. And that's hard to do sometimes. And sometimes he made some plays, particularly against the New England Patriots. He got out of the pocket a couple of times, made big plays outside the pocket, the John Brown play, all of that. So, yeah, he does beat him, but he really never ran the football. This last week, he was 4 rushes for 20 yards against the Dolphins. Week 18, he had 9 rushes for 17 yards against New England. That's not – Josh usually runs for 75 yards, right? I mean, he's usually 50-plus yards for rushing. That's a strategy I think teams are starting to unfurl against the Bills' offense. So defensively, the Bills kind of clamp down. It takes them a little while to get started sometimes, but they do play well against everybody. And then for the offense, it's what I said. Josh is really good, man.
Really good.
He's really good. And they're hard to beat. They're really hard to beat.
Steve, you're a legend, just like I am, more so for sure. There's a lot of hype about the line in Vegas and things of that nature, but expectations of the game, to me, I look at this, I say, the weather might be 3 points. They got the third string quarterback, but you know what? He's a man too. I thought in my heart the whole time, 8 points would have been tops for me on the spread because divisional game too, right? Third time you're playing these guys, and beyond Skylar Thompson, these guys know each other pretty damn well. So, what was your feeling like? And I know you're a pragmatist a little bit like I am, but you weren't seeing a blowout. And do you hear a lot of that and you just shake your head like I do?
A little bit, yeah. And I always remind myself when they do the betting lines in Vegas or any place else, they're not saying who they think really will win the game. What their signs on is what they will bet, not how the game may or may not come out. Because if you're talking about how the game's going to come out, none of us know.
Right.
None of us know. But they're thinking, all right, I think the public perception is that the Bills are pretty stinking good, and the Dolphins are starting their third string quarterback. Nobody thinks this should be a close game. And that's what I think. That's how they set the line. So for me, the line as much reality as it is public perception, and as you know, practice is closed. They just don't know. They just don't know.
For sure. For sure. Well, I would like to dovetail on what you said. I'm in mostly agreement with you. To me, Josh has enjoyed some pretty free releases on his runs. I think he's a terrific pocket passer. Still could get better, but I look at some of the pre-snap reads that he's making, and the understanding, and it matters too if it's a 3 or 4 man rush. If on the snap he can see if there's a spy or not, then maybe you're not tucking the ball and running. Maybe you're throwing that up for grabs ball 20 yards downfield, or just throwing it away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's a great quarterback.
Yeah.
I think there's still more development. Where do you see like Josh's next step?
I think for this offseason, I think one of the things that he needs work on, and you'll see it particularly early in games when he does the quick release, or if he wants to get rid of the ball really fast on a slant or something where he's got a quick check and then come off and go to a different guy real fast on a short route. He's not real accurate when he's throwing those kind of darts. He's pretty good on a slant where he knows where he's going, comes out and knows one guy. But when he comes off that guy and goes to another guy, unless he sets his feet really quick and lets it go right, he has trouble putting it on the guy. You've seen some slants, and we've got a lot of problems with drops, this year in the receiving core. Some of that's on Josh because he doesn't quite put it in the right spot because he hurries his throw a lot. He's got a little arm arrogance, and he knows he can make every throw, and it's easy for him. So he never takes the time to set his feet. And for Josh, it's not about getting the throw made. It's about mechanics of getting it there and putting it right where you need to put it. He can throw it everywhere.
Yeah, and you're right about that. I mean, he doesn't have to set his feet, and he showed that numerous times in the game yesterday. He's all over the place, and the ball comes out on a dart. But if he does, I think to your point, if he can get settled a little bit before he makes that throw, the difference of 8 to 10 inches where it meets the receiver is the difference between a reception and a drop.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially in the New England game last week. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say we had a fun conversation with Drew Bledsoe about 5 weeks ago. Probably the only other guy that can talk about arm arrogance to the extent or the level that Josh can. And we had a fun little breakdown with just Drew, just talking about just arm strength and the ability to put the ball anywhere you want to on the football field. So
yeah. You look at the New England game 2 weeks ago, and he had like 3 drops early in that game. One was to Gabe Davis. It was on a slant. It was back off his back leg, behind him. He's down low. He couldn't even grab it, but he hits it and it drops to the ground. Other throws like that are the ones I like to see him clean up. Now, early in the season, they were running their offense and they were really efficient. They were staying on the field longer than they did a year ago, but they weren't hitting the big plays like they did a year ago. Now, last couple of weeks, it's back to big play, big play, big play. But I think that was a little dictated by the defense, particularly in this last game.
So I'd love to break that down just real quick, and then we can talk about it probably at some other point as well. For me, so sitting in the stands, I was a wreck. So my show, Steve, just so you know, because I'm sure you're not familiar, it's called the Overreaction Postgame Show, and it's based on the fact that Bills Mafia, what do we do? All football fans overreact. So my show is not about X's and O's. It's not about the science of the game. My show is I'm bringing to you, the fan, how I felt on the couch, and more than likely you felt the same. And there was times in that stadium that I was like nauseous. But the moment after the strip sack for a fumble, the crowd was deathly silent, not because we were respecting the offense being on the field. We were shell-shocked. We couldn't believe the last 4 minutes of football that we had watched from the first half of the second half. But on the rewatch, so watching it again today, that was a really good football game. Like when you break it down, like when you know what the outcome is going to be and you're not stressed out, it was just a good football game. But to your point about the offense as well, you know, there's a handle on Twitter at yards per pass, and he used to do a lot of just breakdown stuff. And this is the best thing I've heard about this Bills offense in 2022. And I talked about it last night on the show. He said this after the game. He said, I have zero idea how the Bills put up so many points on offense. He said, it just seems like a cluster most of the time. Like it's just chaos. He said, and then you look up at the scoreboard and they've scored 30 plus points more often than not. And that just,
that's exactly what Steve said, right? You know, you're shooting yourself in the foot, and at the same time, you're hitting the end zone to the tune of 31 points.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like
34.
It was crazy.
Have either of you seen a team make as many self-inflicted mistakes? So not like not a bad coverage on a defensive play that led up a touchdown, just self-inflicted mistakes as this team seems to make week in and week out and overcome them. It just seems unreal. I've never seen a team find a way to win more than this team finds. They just find, you said it, Steve, at the top. This is a good football team. Like,
yeah. Go ahead.
I think, you know, what you're saying, Joe, and what everybody out there is saying is like, we want and we're aching for seeing the Bills put together the beautiful game.
Well, the 90s Bills, I'm old.
Right,
I mean,
right.
there was so much perfection in execution for 4 years that we were just like, watch this. Like,
yeah, I know. And it's crazy, right? I mean, I was in Phoenix, Steve, with Glenn Parker, Jeff Wright.
Oh, man. All right.
Yeah. And Mark Maddox watching at a Bills backers bar, the Bonfire in Tempe or Chandler. And it was a bonfire.
Oh, yeah. I saw your tweet. Yeah.
Yeah. It was crazy. I'm sitting there with Jay Spence, who also does a couple of shows on our network here.
He's in the comments section right now.
Yeah, he's with us tonight. And he and I were like, you know, when you're like mixing it up with your buddy, and he's got me in a headlock and we're jamming each other up. And then all of a sudden, one play later, our hands are at our arms going on our sides, go, what the hell just happened? You know? And I think we're just craving for, I don't know if the word is a boring, methodical, playbook football. I think, frankly, a lot of people would just like to see that so their nerves aren't so frayed.
Yeah. Well, the worst thing that happened was that Buffalo Bills Patriots playoff game in Buffalo last year, the perfect game. I mean, that's the worst thing that could have happened to Buffalo Bills fans.
That's the one I was going to mention. You think that's the way every game's got to go, right?
Right.
And certainly, I'll say this: when the Bills play the way they did that night, and when Josh plays the way he did that night, yeah, they can do that to a lot of teams, teams. But it's hard to do. I mean, you know how we've never seen it before. It's rare that a team can put that kind of effort together. I think this, this game that we just watched and how frustrating it was, with you and the overreaction pods. I mean, I get it. I was feeling the same thing, but I'll just say this. This team, when you get down to it, this team plays its best in big moments. All of them, particularly Josh, and particularly Steph Diggs, and particularly some of the other guys you can name as well. Milano, they show up big.
Yep.
And I think that's going to continue to be the case. That doesn't mean they're going to win every game, but I'll say this: I don't know how. If I've seen them play so poorly that a team's going to run off and leave them on the scoreboard. The only time we've seen it is in the Indianapolis game,
Colts game
last year when they came back and avenged a playoff loss, which I can understand that. But our run defense wasn't what it is last year, and we were susceptible to it, and they took advantage of it. Good on them. They still didn't get to the playoffs.
Yeah.
That was it. And I've been on teams like that where to avenge something, when you bring those guys together and you get an opponent that you can really rally up to and get after. Yeah, a bad team can play great. And that's what happened. I'm not saying they were a bad team, but they played great against us that day. Other than that, this team is hard to beat by double digits, by 10, by 7, by 8. It's hard to beat this team like that. They've had, their last 29 games, they've had 2 games they lost by 6 points in overtime. They were overtime games.
Right.
Other than that, you don't beat them.
Right.
That's crazy. It's crazy to think about.
It's crazy to think about this run that they've been on.
You said it, and you know, most people, you get so caught up in the last game and the things that you loved and the things that you hated, and you can't like just gravitate back to quantifying something like that. And then when you said it, I thought to myself, holy cow, we have a great football team. And Steve, we had Josh Allen's father on, and I keep talking about how this team finds a way. It's not always beautiful. It looks like a disaster every now and again, but they find a way. And Josh Allen, his father, Joel, would say to him, the whole time he was growing up, everything about competition was APO, adjust, persevere, and overcome. And I took that down in my notes, Joe, and I was like, I think I still have that, because all this stuff that Steve's talking about brings me back to what Joel Allen said.
Yep.
Adjust, persevere,
Josh
overcome.
is a great example of it. I mean, he's so gifted, obviously, and he does have some things that get him into trouble because he's the biggest, baddest guy on the field.
I love that.
LeBron. He is LeBron.
Yeah, and so that gets him into trouble sometimes. But when he gets in the right zone in any given Sunday, there's never been anybody like him.
Yeah.
There's never been anybody like him. John Elway was a good imitation of him because John could run and stuff. But back then, you didn't do it because there was no quarterback protection. You were going to get labeled out of bounds. Forget about a cheap hit on the sidelines. You were going to get ridden out of bounds and driven into the ground.
Right.
So, they didn't want their quarterbacks doing that. And it was a smart move back then. Now you need those guys to do that. And there's nobody like Josh who can do that. So, as well as he can. And so, it's a different world, and Josh is the perfect guy for it.
Hey, Steve, we're at this point in the show where what popped out at you? Like what are some shining moments, performances, or by groups that you saw that we could take away from this game? So not everybody in the comment section and listening through this on the download, continues to have their little mini meltdowns, right? Tell us something good.
Yeah. I'll say that, I always think about what I learned about what I always love getting to look at if there's any different kind of game plan that people use against Josh and this team.
Mm-hmm.
What are they, what are they doing? And we talked about it earlier. The Dolphins, they brought pressure, and they went zero and single high safety, manned up on the outside, and they brought pressure. And they didn't want pressure to make Josh or allow Josh to get out of the pocket. There's two things. There's 2 parts of it. Not only are they going to bring an extra rusher, but they were going to hem him in. They weren't running very many stunts. They weren't crossing and Xing too much. They were just coming up their lanes, making sure Josh had to stay back there and just throw. If he could beat him from the pocket, so be it. That was the chance they were going to take, and they were manning up on the outside. That's why they were going deep ball after deep ball after deep ball. There's no safety back there. All you got to do is heave it up, and pass interference, illegal contact, whatever, or you're going to complete it. Now, the one miscommunication with John Brown, Josh throws it up, and to me, a little bit of bad luck, mixed with a little bit of taking a big gamble that didn't pay off on the John Brown interception. If a quarterback throws it up to you like that as your receiver, you got to see it. You got to know he's saying, hey, make a play. Just make a play. Go up and get it. Help me out. See if you can get it. But if you can't, don't let that guy get it. And John Brown, he would know that, but couldn't find the ball. He found it too late, couldn't adjust. And really all he wanted to do was tackle a guy before the ball even got there. If he wasn't going to catch it, just pull the guy down and let the ball bounce. But he didn't pick the ball up in time. That means the guy catches it and gets a chance to run it back, and and they're off and running with a big return on a play. But that's what the team was going to do, and that's what I come out of this with. Last 2 weeks, clubs have made a concerted effort not to let Josh Allen run with the football.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, they hung 35 points on the Patriots and they hung 34 points on the Dolphins. So you got to feel like they did that. He only rushed for 17 or 16 yards against the Patriots, and he rushed for 20 against the Dolphins on 4 rushes. Yeah. That's a different kind of stat line. And if you can start affecting that, maybe you can find a way to beat him. And of course, when you're going zero coverage or zero safety if you're blocking 5 and they're bringing 6, and you're blocking 6 and they're bringing 7, either they're going to nick you for a big play like the Bills were trying to do, or sooner or later somebody's come free and he has to pat the ball and he gets whacked, and it's a sack, strip, fumble, and touchdown going the other way. Or you lay one out on the deep ball and it's a misadjustment and you get an interception. So in some of those cases, you're going to get a play back. And the Dolphins, to their credit, they were willing to take the lumps early.
Yeah.
The Steph Diggs 52-yarder, the long plays they were getting early. They were, listen, if we're going to win, this is how we're going to do it. We can't deviate from it. And they didn't, even when they were down 17-0. And sure enough, they started getting turnovers and it turned around for them.
Yeah,
it did. And, when I look at the good on this, Steve, I mean, the offense put the defense in some pretty rough situations. And, everybody, well, if we didn't have those turnovers, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, I think the defense crushed it. The short fields they had to defend and everything that they did. And beyond that, the secondary looked tighter than I've seen him in weeks. I think, Elam's getting his confidence. Tre'Davious White, he had a step on the guy had a step on him. I can't remember who it was, but his recovery speed is coming back. He lays out, he takes a swipe at the ball, obfuscates it. The receiver can't make the catch. Milano had, 1 or 2 kind of missed tackles, but Tremaine Edmonds looked great. I thought we had fair to good pressure from the front 4, and the run stopping was terrific. I mean, to me, the hallmark of this game is defense can win championships. And if you can really tighten the defense up at this run part of the season, it gives those guys on the offense, maybe, as we saw, a little bit of latitude. They take a few long shots and they can still recover because Leslie Frazier and Milano and Edmonds are there to back them up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. One of the things I noticed too, because we've struggled at it in weeks past at certain times, I thought the defense as a whole, you mentioned Milano missing a couple of tackles. I thought on the whole, the defense tackled really well yesterday.
Really well.
There have been games when they didn't, and it sounds simple, and it is, but it's not easy. And when you say it, people say, of course, but if you watch for it, it's evident. The best tackling team is the best defense. Mm-hmm. The first guy to the football makes the tackle. No extra yards, no broken tackles, the guy they got to have guys open to get yards, and they're not open. And the first guy there makes a tackle. That happened yesterday. A lot of tackles that were one guy, first guy there, boom, down. They did a really much better job yesterday than I've seen them do in a while at tackling. And, Milano getting 2 sacks, and then, Boogie Basham getting a sack, Ed Oliver getting a sack. The defensive
Steve,
line
I got to ask you a question. Is it really a sack if you just beat a tight end to the quarterback? I mean, come on. Shouldn't Boogie just get a half a sack for beating a tight end? I mean, is that really a football player?
Listen, if a quarterback scrambles around and runs out of bounds a yard deep, it's a sack.
It's a sack.
I know.
Roll the ball away.
That's
I'm
the
a
BS sack.
I'm a huge fan of Basham. When I watched him in college a couple of games, and I didn't know who he was. I kept going, "Who is that guy? He's amazing!" And then when the draft came, and they're like, "Yo, Boogie Basham from the Demon Deacons," I was like, "Hey, that's the guy." So
that's the guy. He played. I'll tell you what, he played great yesterday. And this game coming up against Cincinnati. They may have, I doubt that they will, but they may have 3 offensive linemen from their starting 5 out.
Yeah.
And it all depends on Jonah Williams if he can come back. He dislocated his kneecap. He did the same injury in week 5, but he came back and played the next week. Mm-hmm. Lyle Collins is not going to be in there. And Kappa, their guard, he may be back with an ankle. I'm thinking at least one of those guys, one of Jonah Williams or Kappa, will come back. maybe both, but they still going to be without Lyle Collins. So I thought the game completely changed. You know this, John. Last night's game against the Baltimore Ravens, everything changed when Jonah Williams went out and they lost to an offensive lineman. All of a sudden, the Bengals stopped scoring points and stopped moving the football, and it was all because of the guys up front being different.
Well, we're gonna talk about that, but we're gonna also talk about James Cook.
Yeah, you can look at the Patriots game, the first Patriots game a couple weeks ago when Spencer Brown was out and Quisenberry was out there injured, and Uche, like, who is this kid? This kid looks like a monster. Like, are we gonna have to deal? Like, is he another Jalen Phillips? Like, all of a sudden the Patriots have found the next guy, and then Spencer Brown goes out there healthy, and you don't even hear Uche's name in the second game. So yeah, to your point,
right?
Yeah.
Joe,
that was a hint, Joe. If you didn't get it.
I got it. Of course I got it.
All right. So,
I always get it.
Steve, this is the part where we have to give the nod to Q42, our barbecue sponsor. Q42, Iman Azizi makes fantastic rubs and sauces. And we're in the damn playoffs, which means you got to take your tailgate to the playoff caliber level, Steve. If you're not eating Q42 barbecue sauces and rubs, all natural, no filler, crafted in small batches right here in Western New York, and most importantly, John Fina approved, then you need to go to Q42barbecue.com. That's QUE42BBQ.com. And as long as the Bills are still playing, Steve Tasker, you will save 33%.
What? 33?
Yeah. 3s and 3s, baby. We're going with the 3s.
There you go.
When you ground and pound in that coupon code, all capital letters, Fina Show. Even Steve Tasker, the legend, can smoke and grill and barbecue like me for Victory
Beer
Monday. Q42barbecue.com.
Steve, are you a barbecue guy?
Am I a barbecue guy? I eat it. I don't do it.
You don't do it? Well, Q42 is, dare I say, taking over Western New York. It's really like my wife is she's not an aspiring chef. She's just a gifted cooking person like John is. John is very much similar. And the Carolina Gold that he has, she just it's funny because I said that last week. Legit, I said last week that my wife loves the Carolina Gold. It's her favorite barbecue sauce. 3 days later, 2 bottles of Carolina Gold showed up in the mail. So Iman, I hear you. Nice. I appreciate you, and I love you. So you are the man.
Steve, it is really good stuff, and I am an enthusiast in the kitchen. And if it sucked, I wouldn't use it. So,
and just so you know, the Q42, the 42. So Buffalo's on the 42nd parallel. So that's where the Q42 comes from. So that 42 is where Buffalo was at.
Oh, I got it. Yeah, I'm in a village here outside of Buffalo, and the village at the other end of town is called 42 North. So it's just
very good. Yep,
it's the same. It's on that 42 parallel. Yeah.
So you caught that reference immediately. So let's move on to the work.
Yeah, let's move on. But Steve, I want you to weave into the work here something that Joe and I were talking about offline earlier. And Joe's contention is basically the setup for this game. If the Bengals are dinged up at offensive line, what are we going to do to take advantage of it? What's the work? Either Leslie Frazier with game planning or individual performances to take advantage of a softer offensive line.
Can I jump in just kind of
No, the show has my name on it.
It does have your name, true. So just for context sake, because Steve, you were talking a second ago about the Dolphins defense, and the Dolphins defense, there's a measure of hubris involved in the Dolphins defense, and there's a measure of hubris involved in the Bills defense. And what that hubris is I don't care what other teams have done to beat you, our next opponent. We're going to game plan, and we're going to do what we do. So for the Dolphins, it's pretty well known, at least this year, you run a tight zone with a cover 2 shell, and it limits a lot of Josh's best skills, run a spy, blah, 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 blah. The Dolphins don't care. Single high, zero blitz, whatever. Man, we're going to do what we do, and we're going to beat you our way. Right. The Buffalo Bills do the exact same thing. We don't care what the Niners and we don't care what the Chargers did to the Dolphins to basically emasculate Tua Tagovailoa. We're going to run our nickel 4-2 out there. We're going to play off coverage, and we're going to beat you our way. So that's kind of where this whole thing kind of comes from. So to John's point, like, what do you see this defense doing against a very damaged, hurt, maligned offensive line of the Bengals this weekend?
Well, I don't know. It remains to be seen. I think it's unfortunate because this is the exact time of year and the exact situation that you sign a Von Miller for. It's exactly why he was brought in. And you don't have him. I mean, he's out with a knee injury. But this is also why you draft AJ Epinesa, why you draft Boogie Basham, and why you draft Greg Rousseau. That's why you draft Ed Oliver. That's why you revamp completely your total defensive line roster. Outside of Ed, you bring in DeQuan Jones, you bring in Jordan Phillips, and you bring in Tim Settle, and you turn those guys loose. These are the games that you do that for. And this is a game where those defensive ends have got to dig deep. They got to win, and they got to win now. If the Bills can get quick pressure or even on-time pressure with 4 guys, they win the game.
Right.
They win the game.
I agree.
That's the blueprint every game.
I agree.
The blueprint every game.
Now, they can do it maybe once in a while, sending 5, whatever. But if they start having to send 6 guys to get pressure, if they start having to, go 0, cover 1, 0 high safeties, go man and try and get pressure, it's going to be a long day.
Can you, as a wide receiver, talk to because you played wide receiver, that was your role outside of special teams. There was 3 instances yesterday that I counted specifically. One of them was the Kaiir Elam interception, where the Dolphins went 3 wide to a side, and there was only 2 Bills defenders out there, and then a safety shifted over about 22 yards deep. Does that, when you see that formation, now it worked with Kaiir because Skylar Thompson picked the wrong receiver. He threw it right at Kaiir Elam versus throwing it to the guy that was going to be open. And I know that there's some guesswork in that. But when you see that as a wide receiver, hey, there's 3 of us out here. We got 2 in front of us, and 1 dude is a mile away. Like, can you just talk about that formation real quick, offensively, defensively, yada? Like, can you work us through that?
Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen until you get out there and line up, right? So having a play called that would be perfect against it is probably unlikely.
Right.
Because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
If you have automatic adjusts and you make a little eye contact with your quarterback or one of your other your teammates out there, and you've got these adjustments on, the adjustments, you run those, and you should be able to get somebody open pretty fast. If it's the down and distance where it's 3rd and 18, it doesn't matter. Somebody's still got to go 18, right? So they don't care. You can get somebody open right away and throw it 5 yards. We're going to come up and make the tackle, and it's going to be 4th and 12.
Right.
So all that's in the mix as well. Kaiir, and I think in this scenario we're talking about with the Kaiir interception, I haven't gone back and looked. I'm thinking it was zone coverage.
It was.
And they zoned it off. And what happens when that guy came out and turned that corner route and came in front of the safety, they did not have the 3rd guy. They were going to try to get somebody either over the middle or down the seam along with the corner. The problem is the 3rd guy wasn't out in the flat. There was nobody for Kaiir to guard short.
Right.
His zone was vacant and there was no
empty
threat.
So he could
sloughed
float
off. Yeah, He sloughed off, dropped back into the throwing lane after the fact. And, Skylar didn't know he was going to do that. He didn't have a guy out there to hold him up towards the line of scrimmage, threw it to the guy deep, and the underneath defender, which is Kaiir Elam, dropped back in it and just snagged it. It was an easy catch.
Yeah.
That's what happened, I think, on that play. You've got more offensive players than defensive players. Yeah, you can take it, snap quick, and whip it out there and do a bubble screen, and let's go and see if the guy can make one guy miss and get a nice play out of it. You see a lot of teams do that, and that's always an option. On a down and distance or when you're backed up in your own end, that's usually, if you're backed up in your own end, I think that's kind of what I would anticipate doing more of, because it's a more high percentage throw to complete. The 3rd, the one down the field, and that's why you got to tip your hat to the Dolphins for making the Bills go deep all day. It's a low percentage completion, even if you're going against air. If you're out there on the practice field and you throw it, it's hard to do that, right? It's hard to get it. So doing it against a defense, it's hard to hit those deep passes.
Yeah.
So and so that's why you put 3 guys over there, you put 2 defenders over there, and throw the safety over the top late. What you do is you're just trying to. It's not about the receivers and having those guys covered or whatever. What it is about is making the quarterback think you've got this coverage being played, and all of a sudden it's not.
Right. Got it.
So Skylar Thompson might have thought he had a play there, and then when the safety comes over late, 22 yards deep, what that tells you is those corners, they're not going deep. They're going to get underneath. No. They're going to dare you to beat it. They don't care if you try and go deep on them because they got a safety back there for that. Yeah. So they're not going to drop out of there. And can I
press you on one more thing offensively?
Yeah.
This is the over. You can have a chance.
It's not my turn. I mean, we're getting long in the tooth. We promised we'd cut Steve loose. I
promise you get a chance.
That's it.
At the rate that this Buffalo Bills defense has seen bubble screens and wide receiver screens work against them, can you, for the life of you, figure out why we cannot run a wide receiver screen? Like, why is
you can't run everything, Joe? You can't do everything.
Why isn't the defense just walking the tape over to the offense and be like, "Here you go, just do this"?
I don't know. I can't really speak to the specifics of it, but I have a suspicion, and I think it has something to do with Josh.
All right.
When you've got a quarterback who can outrun people, you tend to have things in place to keep him from running. If you got like a spy, right? If you got a spy and he whips it out there, that spy don't have to watch Josh anymore.
Right.
So he can just go, and that's just the extra defender out there, and it's a problem. I think also teams are wary of just having an offense that runs like Buffalo. I think teams with mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I think they struggle with that more than teams like Cincinnati and more than teams like Tampa Bay or Dallas.
A quarterback that's going to be an anchor in the pocket.
I think a quarterback who can run for some reason, defensive lineman, whatever, for whatever reason, I think they got their antenna up more for me. That's what I think. There may be more specific and more in-depth answers than that.
Makes sense.
But I think there's something in the fact that they got a quarterback that can outrun 8 defenders on the field. I think that makes it hard. It was that way with Daboll too. They tried to run him. You've seen them try to run it at times, and they stink.
Yeah.
And I thought, and John, maybe you can talk about this. I thought maybe it was a point where the Bills didn't have either. I thought 3 years ago, like in 18, 4 years ago when Josh was a rookie, 18, maybe a little bit of 19, they didn't have the offensive lineman that could get out in front of him and do anything. They didn't have guys that could do it. Like
hey, be careful, Steve, because Joe is going to tell you the offensive line is terrible.
It was not.
But hold on a second.
If you think this offensive line's terrible, go back and look at 2018 offensive line.
Right.
Yeah. Well, listen. Hey, before we miss it, Steve, we do have a super chat from the lovely and talented Pamela. Who would like to know. Hey, Steve, Joe, and John. Steve, how do you think? Steve, how do you think Dorsey is doing?
Well, they're 13-3 on the season.
14-3
on the season. 14-4. Well, no, they played 16 games. They're 13-3.
13-3, but 14 with the playoff game.
14 with the playoff
14
game.
Now 14-3, yeah, with the playoff game. And I think they're doing really well, and they scored more points this year per game than they did last year.
Yes,
that's hard to believe.
Just by a hair, but still, it comes out over 17 games. They scored more games this year than they did last year per game. I think he's doing fine.
We're getting a little bit late. We told Steve only an hour, but we're pressing against that. So let's
we own Steve for at least 7 more minutes.
Let's press into this Bengals game and just what do you think? Just expectations for the Buffalo Bills, knowing kind of what you saw right a couple weeks ago, and it looked like it was going to be a 51-50 shootout, even though we know that this Bills team is a second half defensive team specifically. What do you expect to see from both the Bengals and the Bills in this next game on Sunday?
I think it'll be a one-score game.
Wow!
At the end of it,
nice.
I would tend to take the over. I think they're going to score 60 points.
Together,
I do
combined.
Yes, yeah, 30 to 30, 31, 34, 30, something like that.
Right.
I think that's what it's going to take to win this game. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Cincinnati's offensive line does, whether they are healthy enough and able enough to stay in there and give Joe time. If Joe Burrow has time to throw, the Bengals may win this game. That's going to be the key. The Bills have got to get Joe Burrow running around back there. Their receiving quality go too deep for you to go man to man against the top three guys and not have somebody open. Yeah. They're just too good. So you're going to have to zone it off a little bit, but pass pressure is paramount. I don't have a problem. I think the Bills run the ball better than the Bengals do. Statistically, and certainly Josh is a part of that, but who cares? Because you know what? If you're the Bengals, you got to defend it.
Counts. That's right.
You got to defend it. If Josh is running it, it's not like they get to say they didn't let him run and then bring it back because it was a quarterback running. No, it counts.
I honestly could throw up every time everybody says, "Well, without Josh Allen's rushing yards," and I'm like, "Well, they're there. You can't say without him." All right, yeah, I got two questions for you, Steve. And you got to settle a bet for me.
All right.
Or a beatdown. And then the other one is just a yes or no. All right. Okay. The first one is, and I know you're a wide receiver, special teams, DB kind of guy, but I contend that there is an immutable fact to pass protection that tackles, given physics, speed, leverage, can only take a guy to 9 yards. And that it's incumbent on quarterbacks to be at 8, 8.5, 7, 7.5. Otherwise, danger. And I'm saying when quarterbacks drop too deep,
right,
they get in trouble because there's no way as an offensive tackle that you can defend against 4 yards and 10.
Of course, that's a fact.
Sweet.
You got an offensive lineman who's backpedaling against a guy running forward. He can't outrun him for 10. He can't outrun him for more than, even with a 2-yard head start, which is what you've got about.
Yeah.
With this belly, I could barely get to 6.
You can't backpedal and pass set that deep faster than the guy can run that fast. Yeah. The guy runs there faster than you can backpedal to get there. So yeah, of course.
Yeah. For context, just because one thing that John has done a very good job of with this show, we do film breakdown as well on a normal kind of Monday when we don't have a guest. John has done a very good job of educating the average fan of football that doesn't know. So that's something that's never talked about on television. So you see a quarterback get sacked like wildly, like the defensive ends just like merge on the quarterback, and the announcer never says, well, he went further than 9 yards. Like,
that's because they have no idea because they're clueless.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Tony Romo
does. It doesn't matter if it's 9. It doesn't matter if it's 9 yards or 7. He's got to climb the pocket.
Right.
He's got to step up in the pocket. You got to feel that. I mean, and a little bit of this isn't dictated by. Listen, in our playbook, the quarterback drops back 7 yards, and you got to take him back. No, you take your pass set, and if the guy's trying to turn the corner, you push him as deep as you can, and the quarterback's got to be good enough to feel it and hear it.
Right.
And this, that's why they have ear holes. You can hear those guys working around you. Right. So, yeah, you're right. It's up to the quarterback to step up. And that's why, too, tackles have that kind of ability to run the guy past the quarterback behind him. But it's incumbent on the guards and center to be stout enough not to get pushed back into the quarterback's lap. That's their struggle.
Right.
They gotta anchor. And that's, it helps them that there's less space in there because there's guards and there's not that much space. That helps them, but they've got to be able to anchor so the quarterback has a place to step up behind them into. So each position has its own issues, but yeah, Fina's right. John's right. You can't
Victory Monday. Hold on.
I didn't know that was. I didn't know that was. You know.
Victory lap coming, incoming victory lap.
I didn't know there would be people that disputed that.
It's just more about what we've done. So
it's just
the
more about education and learning.
The dynamic between John and I has been very good on the show for the last couple of years because I'm a fan. I played a little bit of high school football. I didn't play in college. I didn't play in the pros, right? So I come at from a purely fan aspect. So I'm asking fan questions. And John, as a player, is like, why are you asking that question? Because to you guys, it just makes sense. And to us, it's like, what do you mean he can't drop back further than 10 yards? That doesn't make any sense. It's like, no, that's the rule. He can't drop further than 9. That's the rule.
Well, it's like it's a rule too that you have to keep breathing. I don't know why you have to write it down though.
My second question, it's a two-parter real quick before we get to the super chat. Steve, if I come to the game this weekend, will you pretend like you know me and actually cheers me with a
he'll be there. He'll be in attendance.
Absolutely. You're going to be there.
Victory Monday again.
He'll be in attendance.
I'm surprised you've been in town a couple of times. I've seen your Twitter feed and everything. I never hear from you. You never say hi. Like look me. Like reach out to me. Nothing.
Well, I always felt like
obviously I was a big factor. I was a big factor, big mold, big mentor for you when you were a young player. I know. So
you actually were, Steve. I will reach out more. I think everybody leaves the game and separates a little bit. But hey, real quick, I know we're keeping it long, Steve. You've been amazing, as both of us knew you would. And I can't thank you enough for responding to my text, my 19th text message.
It's like, who is this?
Dude, I love you. I don't know if James is this.
You didn't get my text. You didn't get my text like this is a new phone. Who is this?
A new phone. Who is
Who it is?
Right.
No, guys, I'll come on anytime. It's great. I'll come on. Just ask me. I'm an old guy now. I got lots of free time in the evening.
All the kids have moved out. Hey, Steve. So listen, here's my quick breakdown on James' question. Thank you for the super chat. 279. That must have something to do with Spencer Brown.
No, Canada.
Canada.
Oh, Canada. Yeah.
Is that purple chicken dollars? I mean, is that real money?
I don't know. Just get to the question.
So I rate
so hard.
I rate Spencer Brown as a B this year, and I'll tell you why. Number one, and Tasker will remember this, everybody comes for the Buffalo Bills when they're doing well, just as they do for everybody that's winning. You're getting their best Super Bowl effort every time they play our club.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tough place for him to be. He just came off of, looks like probably a decompression surgery in his back. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe a laminectomy, maybe a laminotomy. I don't know. He needs to do a few things. He needs to keep his hips closed and not sexy and wide open and swinging. Can't give up the corner. And the guy is massive. He needs to lower his pad level by about 3 to 5 inches. And he needs to trust his strike because he's not striking, he's placing. And the difference is, to Joe Miller's credit, about a yard. When you take that guy to 7, if you strike him, you take him to 8. Or if you're taking him to 8, you take him to 9. You got to affect the angle of the rush.
Super. I would go along with you. I think he's a way above average right tackle in the NFL. Now, certainly he's got some strengths. One of his strengths is the fact the guy's 6'8", and he's long, and he's got a good reach. He's also he's got the right attitude as well. Will Wolford told me one night, you can think about this. Left tackles are genetic freaks. Those guys are different genetically. They're gifted. They're really gifted.
Don't say that to him.
If you're a right tackle, what you really need to be a good right tackle is a mean streak.
Totally agree. He brings what we need in that.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what Spencer Brown is. We saw it early on. Now, I'll say this too. It's his second year. I think there have been games when he struggled with certain types of guys, and certain guys have his number or seem to have a better day against him. But I think those guys are getting fewer and far between. I think he's getting better. He's got a ways to go, but I think he has the right mindset. He's going to get better. His third year, I look for bigger things from him. But I'm with you, John. There are certain things he needs to do, but they're technically above my pay grade. I couldn't, the pad level thing. Certainly a guy 6'8", you would think he'd need to drop his pad level a little bit. I see that some as well. It'll be easier for him to anchor. It'll be easier for him to go lateral, all of that stuff. If he could lower his pad level just a little bit, when you get too tall, you just get too topply, So yeah, I'm with you. I think he's a good draft pick. I think they're right on with him. I think he's going to be plugged in at the right tackle for as long as he can play healthy. And I don't think they'll be saying there in the offseason that they need to replace him. I know there's a ton of guys on this roster, and this has been the way that Brandon Beane has worked it during their time here. And it's frightening at certain times of the year, like coming up in 4 weeks, hopefully, when the Bills go to and win the Super Bowl. Whenever the season's over and you start evaluating, people are going to come to the realization there's about 15 guys on this roster who really played a lot and contributed, who are on 1-year deals or in the last year of a 2-year deal.
Yep.
They got some, Saffold, I think, has got 1 more year on his deal, but there's a ton of guys who are in the last year of their deal or signed a 1-year deal with the Bills. A lot of them. It was the same story last year. This is when Sean McDermott and the culture and what people say about this team and this town and this franchise and the fan base, that's why they get free agents to come in and say, I want a piece of that. You got a quarterback that's unlike any other, gives you a chance. The guy's a monster. Yeah, okay, I'll come play for you guys for a year. Give me a 1-year deal. And they'll do it. So that is one of the things too. So whether Spencer Brown's good or not, they're still going to have a couple of slots on the offensive line where they're going to have to get some guys in, It'll be interesting to see how they work this roster in the offseason. We're not there yet, obviously, but Spencer Brown, I think they're pretty happy with the way he's played.
One last question, and then we're going to get out of here. And it's an education question for the fan base. So, Steve, you played football in the NFL, obviously, and you started your career without a visor, and then you went to a smoked visor. There's a lot of players that wear a smoked visor. Ezekiel Elliott is playing right now. He's wearing a smoked visor. Pre-game, Steph and Josh both wear mirrored visors, but they don't wear them in the game. Can you tell the fans real quick the stipulation behind being allowed to wear a visor, specifically a smoked visor, versus not?
Yeah, you got to have a doctor's note, basically.
Yeah.
I'll write it.
You got to have some sort of condition that makes it better. Yeah, I mean, that's what it takes. I switched and got a visor. Mine was a smoked visor. I also played with a clear visor for a minute, too. I got my cornea scratched.
Gotcha.
That's how it started.
Gotcha. Interesting.
I got my cornea scratched in practice, and I was like, give me something to cover that up. I don't want that to happen again. So that's that's where that came from. And then after a while, I stopped wearing it as well at the end of my career.
Yeah, it seems like for a running back and a quarterback, a smoked visor pays huge dividends. But yeah, so
let me add my final.
Actually, no, I'm looking at the last helmet I wore, and it does have a visor on it, but it's clear.
Clear.
So I had
because I got my cornea scratched.
Yeah,
I had a clear visor on for about 3 plays. That's about how long it took me to realize that when I engaged with a guy, I was a spitter. So I would literally just spit. Like my whole visor looked like Buffalo in July in a downpour.
Windshield, I couldn't
like see a thing. Right? Yeah. I was like, I'll get poked in the eye all day long. I can't see anything.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been tuned into the Off Tackle with John Fina show, brought to you by the Market Dominator team on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network, presented by Picasso's Pizza. My name is Joe Miller. Just super awesome just to be a part of this group and to be on this show with John Fina, with Steve Tasker. Final thoughts, gentlemen. Steve, any final thoughts?
No, I'm looking forward to this game. I think this is going to be a 1-score game. I hope the weather's great so the guys can play and we can see these two quarterbacks. It's a game that never was. It's going to be 3:00 on Sunday, the early window. I think this is a game because of what happened in the Monday night game in the first meeting with DeMar Hamlin. I think you're going to get like 6 gazillion people watching this game.
I was going to ask you, are you surprised by that it got the 3:00 Sunday slot? Not a prime time?
No, that's a monster slot.
Oh, is it? Gotcha.
The 4:25 slot on Sunday afternoon is a monster slot. That's the slot of the week.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's why those 425 games on Sunday are big deals.
Gotcha.
They go national, and there'll be, I don't know, there'll be 50 million people watching that.
Nice. I'll tell you this right now: the Bills establish a running game anyway. Josh Cook or Motor, and they get pressure on Burrow with 4. Bills by 10.
Yeah, if they don't, I'll tell you this too: if the Bills don't turn it over like they did, if they don't turn it over, they're too hard to beat.
Yeah.
They're really just too hard to beat.
Yeah,
I've been 4 quarters, they outdistance you.
I've been saying since about week 6, the only team in the NFL that can beat the Bills are the Buffalo Bills. It's the only team.
I told you they have seen the enemy, and it is them.
Yeah,
they're their own worst enemy.
Well, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Buffalo Rumblings, myself, John Fina, Steve Tasker. Tomorrow, Jay Spencer King on the Code of Conduct has Levi Wallace. Wednesday in the Hump Day Hotline, Sal Capaccio will be joining us. Thursday, I believe, the After the Snap podcast with Reed and Blake Ferguson, and then also the Jerry Ostrowski Show, the 3-man rush. So for myself, for John, for Steve, for all of us here at Buffalo Rumblings, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.